I am mining investor and editor of Resource Stock Digest, Gerardo del Real, here with my friend, partner, colleague, man that wears many hats, Mr. Nick Hodge, who among those many hats is an investor and the publisher of Daily Profit Cycle. This is the 326th episode of our weekly therapy session that we call Investing in Bizarro World. We're going to talk about markets, what we're investing in. We're going to talk about how many more episodes I get to yell, Jerome. We're going to talk about Nick being gone for a week and all of a sudden kids didn't get raped and the Epstein files never existed. It's amazing. It's amazing. We fixed it all. It's all fixed. We're going to talk gold. We're going to talk Bitcoin. Lots to get to, Nick. I feel like you've been gone for a long time because, my Lord, it's been a lot. MP Materials, Apple, Epstein files, Jerome. I could go on and on. You were at Rick Rule's symposium, which, ironically enough, is down in the Boca Raton area. Epstein's old playground and stomping grounds. And I say that sarcastically, obviously. But before we get to all the madness and the bizarro-ness that's going on, how are you first and foremost, sir? Welcome back. We missed you last week.
I appreciate that. Thank you for holding it down with Mr. Jody DeRouge, and thanks to him as well for coming on and providing his insights on critical metals, minerals, geology, and prospective companies that contain assets or properties that have those critical minerals. He has been sought after and looked to for a number of years in Canada now for the land packages and the early work that he's done on them, bending them into some very successful companies that you and I have been a part of. So that was a wonderful discussion. I do have to say, though, you made it sound like I was connected to no kids getting raped last week. You said Nick was gone for a week and no kids got raped. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
I'm, of course, referring to the Epstein list. Now we're being told. Look, I'm sorry, folks. We have to start there. I'm going to be serious because it's a serious topic. This is not a partisan issue. I tweeted as much or posted on X as much. This is just nothing to do with partisanship. When Biden was in office, I was equally critical and I was equally calling for the Epstein files, the list, the logs, whatever you have. I don't care what it is. What I do know is that Pam Bondi got up there and told us when they were campaigning, when she was elected to her position, to her post, that the reason it was taken a bit is because they had to go through thousands of videos of kids getting raped and abused, and that they had to make sure that they gave it the attention that such heinous crimes merited. And I applauded that because I don't care who it is that's prosecuting these people. Let me try to keep it PG for the beginning part of this. Whoever it is, whoever goes after these people, I don't care if they're billionaires. I don't care if they help inform policy. I don't care if they're immigrants. I don't care if they're in my family. You go after them and you put them under the prison, right? And whichever party does that, whichever prosecutor does that, I applaud it and support it. And that is one of the initiatives that I really supported about this administration. For them, you did. And I just...
Hey, they were also going to cut the deficit, Gerardo.
Well, I knew that one was bullshit. Right? There goes the PG tag, right? I knew that one was bullshit. I knew that one wasn't going to happen. In fairness, Elon did identify some places where we could cut, and then they cut him out. And so now Elon started his own party. I don't know if you missed that while you were gone, but he's starting his America party. And look, on the back of this, insult to his own base, insult to MAGA, insult to anybody that really believed that this was going to happen. He's now saying it's only weak-minded MAGA people that think this isn't a hoax, and you people are traitors, and I don't want your support because you've fallen for the Democrat lie. And I'm like, do you know you're on video, dude? Like, do you know your prosecutor's on video? Do you know that you are on video and record talking about how you two were best buddies for a while? And look, I don't care about any of that. If you didn't do anything, put out the lists and the logs so we can see who did.
My parents always told me you were guilty by association, Gerardo.
Exactly. And if you did do something, go under the prison like everyone else. I want to go under the prison. So look, I don't want to make this too long-winded because we are going to get to the markets. General Mike Flynn said it the best in his own nonpartisan way. This is going to be a little bit long-winded. Just after I said it wasn't going to be long-winded, it's a great post and it echoes my sentiments, right, about how I feel about this. He said, at real Donald Trump, I hesitated to write this. However, with the utmost respect and deference to you for all you've withstood, you know it better than me what the deep state can do when they want to turn on a person. The Epstein affair is not about who killed him or if he committed suicide. Personally, I'm glad this known pedophile is dead, but neither is this a hoax. The issue goes beyond all that. There are millions of Americans who overwhelmingly voted for you to be our president, and we want you to be massively successful. No one more than me. Personally, I still have a target on my forehead. I know that, but like you, I still fight. Beyond all that, our country is facing a level of internal subversion, and it is a relentless attack on the very foundation of our constitutional republic. If you're not successful, our country may not survive. It is that extreme of a situation we currently face. Read Lincoln's speech of 1838. He knew, as you know, and as we all can see with our very eyes, our nation will not die from a foreign foe. Never. If we die, it will be by our own suicide. I'm going to skip the rest of it. You can go to at General Flynn on X to see the rest of it, but I will go ahead and close out with how he closed out. He said, with my strongest recommendation, please gather your team and figure out a way to move past this. The rollout of this was terrible. No way around that. Americans want America to be successful. So we need you to be successful. This is someone who willingly fought for this country against multiple enemies overseas, only to come here to face my greatest enemy right here at home. And, he goes on to say that this is not about Epstein or the left. It's about committing crimes against children. If he were part of an intel operation known or run by our CIA, shame on them. And those responsible must be held accountable if that was the case. There's another country involved, and shame on them as well. If there are elites inside of our country that committed crimes against children, shame on them, and they must be held accountable. Regardless of what class of society abuses and commits crimes against children, it is never acceptable. So when I hear months and months of campaigning about how they're going to target immigrants and get the rapists and the criminals, and I'm all for getting the rapists and the criminals out of the country. And then you're targeting the little paleta lady that's selling the lollipops, and you're targeting the people, in the farms that are showing up to work, and you're targeting the people that are getting their cases dismissed by showing up to court because they're trying to do it legally. And now you want to tell your own base and us as Americans that this never existed. So by default, you're telling us just take it. We're powerful. We're wealthy. We run the country. We run the world. We make the laws. We can rape kids if we want to, and you'll vote for it. And I just don't believe that's the country we live in. And I think this is the first time that his base is really, really, his hardcore base is really, really getting to see how indifferent all politicians, it's not just him, it's just him right now, are to all of us. And so if you underestimate Elon Musk with his capital and his intellect and his ability to create databases and algorithms targeting the states that he needs for his party to succeed, whether it's backing primary people that are for the defense cuts and are for not raping kids, if you underestimate that on the heels of this, I think it's going to be an interesting primary. And look, on this, the MAGA people, the Trump people, the libertarian people, the people on the left, I think we all agree. We want to know what happened and who was accountable, and we want to hold them accountable. Who was guilty and who was accountable, who should be accountable. It's not that difficult for me.
If you're partisan at this point, you're an idiot. If you believe what anything the politicians say at this point, you're an idiot. You should just be an enemy of the state. It was George Carlin who told you that it's one big club and you ain't in it. And so, of course, they altered the tape. Of course, the metadata was discovered. Of course, there's a massive cover up on, right? And this goes beyond Trump, and it goes well beyond Biden. It goes to the core of the U.S. Establishment class and their cohorts. And so you've read all the same things I've read. If he was an asset of Mossad or an asset of intelligence, you've seen that Acosta said that he was an asset of intelligence. That's a quote, and to leave it alone. You've seen Miss McCain, John McCain's wife, say that everyone knew what he was doing. It was out there in open air. It was a known secret, as they say. And you've seen people very high up on both sides. So this isn't like a congressman state thing. This is like a president prime minister thing, right? Whether it's Ehud Barak, who led Israel in the late 1990s and early 2000s, known to affiliate with Epstein. Bill Clinton, president of the United States, President Trump, president of the United States, Prince Andrew of the royal family. I mean, look, we all know what this is. What list do you fucking need? I mean, right at this point, you should just tell yourself, as I've done, like, they're all fucked, right? So
Bill
why spend?
Gates,
Bill Gates got divorced
his
from his
wife said, "I
husband.
divorced him."
Les
Like,
Wexner, Jess Staley. I'll go on down the list, right?
keep
I mean,
going, please.
publicly
Yeah.
traded companies, private equity corporations that manage billions, if not trillions of dollars. I mean, look, we know what this is. If you're still clamoring for a list, you're missing the forest for the trees, right?
Yeah.
So they were doing everything that you can imagine they were doing, and then probably more. Everyone you think was involved was involved. I mean, you've seen the pictures. You've seen Ghislaine at Chelsea Clinton's wedding after Jeff Epstein was convinced of sex trafficking
Convicted. Yeah.
in Florida. Exactly right, man. So like, that's what it is. It pisses me off to no end, obviously, that you can't get transparency, but that's nothing new for the U.S. government in the past half century or century either, whether it's tormenting and terrorizing Martin Luther King Jr. and then naming a street after him in every city in the United States,
Yeah.
or the involvement that's involved in JFK, you know, it's like, and then you just get the obfuscation and they play semantics. And I was talking about semantics on this podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's what they do
1984.
to,
Yeah.
it's what they do to keep the populace confused, right? So war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. And the best person that I found that documents this and routinely pounds the table on it, because you know, some of us understand what's going on, but we don't want to talk about it or pound the table on it every day, is Rudy Havenstein on
Absolutely.
Twitter.
Shout out to Rudy, man.
And he's got a Substack, really, with which is free. You can subscribe if you want, but it's free. And he's laid out, you know, tons of evidence, details, news articles over the years. I mean, the stuff is crazy, right? Like,
And
you know,
has been, like you said, that's an important point. He's been doing this for years. He's one of my favorite follows, if not my favorite follow on X.
yeah, they bought their house. Jeffrey Epstein, you know, that house where everyone was partying in New York. Like, they bought that house from a lady Rothschild, right? And I mean, the connections are just, and she's on the board of like the McCain Foundation, the Rothschild lady. Like, it is what you think it is, man. I mean, I don't know how else to say that. So, again, one big club, you ain't in it. Welcome to the outsider club. Worry about yourself and your family and what's best for them, in spite of whatever's going on inside the DC Beltway and the Palm Beach enclaves and the islands, etc. Whether that's pedophilia, whether that's destruction of the purchasing power of your currency, whether that's disenfranchising you and not doing the will of the people when they vote for certain things here in Spokane, as I've chronicled, or as you just laid out brilliantly, you know, what they voted Trump in for, which was Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, and we're gonna release the Epstein files, and Doge, and we're gonna cut the debt, and we're gonna
no
cut
more
the
wars.
deficit, and this guy, I was getting there, that's my last one, and no more wars, and then we're gonna drop bombs on Iran. Like, I've seen this for the past 12 fucking years. They gave Obama a peace prize for bombing 5 Muslim nations. Being independent. Come on, y'all.
That's an absolute fact. Brilliantly put. Look, just for kicks sometimes, I'm not a betting guy, right? I do enough of that in the market. I look at the poly markets, right? And so I look at the poly market, and the betting markets say there is more than a 99% chance Trump is named in the Epstein files. Now, this isn't like, people are betting this, y'all. So, I mean, if you want to take the counter to that, go ahead and put $1 up and you can get 99 back, everybody. Like, that's how much the public now believes, the betting public. This isn't the right public or the left public or the libertarian public. Forget your partisan allegiances on this one, y'all. The betting public on all sides believes there's a 99% chance he's in the files, y'all. Which, look, if we're going to keep it to the Trumpster and we're going to get to gold and silver and PGMs and rare earths and Apple and all that, but let's talk Jerome. Jerome, of course, our Fed chair. We woke up this morning to another one of Trump's many quotes. He started by saying he couldn't believe Jerome was appointed by Biden. He forgot it was Trump that appointed him.
Fuck, dude.
Forgot it was himself that appointed him. And then he said he's already got a letter asking him to resign and essentially firing him, and that he was shopping it around his Republican base to see if other senators agreed with that. So immediately gold went from flat to up $25. Silver immediately went from flat to up 0.5% to 1%. PGMs rallied, the dollar started tanking almost immediately. Bond yields, which I've been telling you, we talked about this last week and the week before that, how they had been calm for 2 to 3 weeks, and how that was actually a positive sign because of the $7 trillion in debt that we have to refinance internally here in this country. Which is why, by the way, Donald Trump is so hell bent on getting somebody in there that will drastically cut rates, even though inflation, and we're going to talk inflation, and then we're going to talk about the difference between the stupid fucking numbers that you people read and the tariff inflation, which are two different points. You know, these are different data points, and so we'll get to that as well. But look, the markets did not like the reaction, and 2 hours later, Trump was back on saying, "No, no, no, I don't think we're going to do anything." He saw the reaction. There was a brilliant article that an advisor and mentor to us sent us last night. Stanley Druckenmiller, who's one of the people, along with George Soros, broke the Bank of England, right? And he essentially shorted it to all hell, and just won that short and made a gazillion dollars, right?
A
And guess who
billion.
his apprentice was in that article, right? And at that time, it's Scott Bessent, right?
Oh,
The,
sure.
the Treasury Secretary. He was one of the people that learned how to do that. You better believe this Treasury Secretary is telling Trump what's going to happen. And Druckenmiller coming in and saying America's next. Can you imagine if our mentor was betting against our company, Nick, and saying you guys are going to blow up, and I know it, and I'm betting a lot of money against you guys? I would look at myself in the mirror and look at you and say, what are we doing wrong? And we have to change this immediately if he's betting against us, because he's been instrumental in our success and in opening a lot of doors. And so I got to believe that internally they're scrambling, they're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Nothing's sticking right now. So I don't know how much longer Jerome's going to last, but the market certain believes that Trump's not stable enough to keep him around for very long, and maybe he doesn't have a choice because of the wall that they've painted themselves in. And this latest big, beautiful bill sure in the heck didn't help. I like the critical metals part of it. We'll talk about that later. Credit where credit is due. That part is brilliant. But look, adding trillions to the deficit and giving permanent tax cuts to us rich people and even much, much, much richer people and making those permanent while you give 3-year tax cuts on tips. Again, it's a shell game, folks, and you better figure out which side of the table you're on. Um, it's dicey out there right now, Nick. It's dicey out there. Thoughts on Jerome and the reaction
No,
of
it's
the market?
a ton of stuff. Can't believe that the president of the United States didn't believe that he appointed Jerome Powell. He probably doesn't remember that he clamored for his signature to be on the first round of stimulus checks, which during COVID, which I will continue to remind you of. It's what kicked off this most recent cycle, and indeed probably the commodity super cycle in 2020 that's led to platinum at 11, 12-year highs, copper at all-time highs, et cetera, et cetera. Back to Besant and Druckenmiller and Soros. It's so interesting because they need the long-term bond yields to come down. But that doesn't happen like when the economy isn't growing at 3+%, and when inflation is going up, right? People want higher yields to take on that risk, which is obviously growing. The risk is growing. We've seen the downgrades of U.S. debt in recent months. We've seen their unwillingness to cut the debts and deficits, which is another thing that you would actually need to get bond yields to be where you need them to be. And so you've got a couple of choices, which is what you're talking about. They're throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. They want to cut rates, right? They want someone in the Fed chair's seat that'll cut rates. Except it's not the right time to do that. As you said, inflation was just ticking back up. I just said copper's at all-time highs. We're nowhere near their 2% target. And so they want to install somebody who will do that for them, except you can't really force Jerome to resign. I mean, he can resign on his own, but you can't, as the president, say, you're out. Jerome's term isn't up until May 2026, I believe it is. So instead of doing the actual things that need to be done that you said you were going to do, the 3-3-3 plan, the reduction of the deficit, et cetera, what you've done and demanded to sign on the day of independence of this country, July 4th, was a bill that expanded the debts, that is going to lead the M2 money supply even higher than it already is. And so Soros's bet is twofold, right? Because in the short term,
Druckenmiller's. Yeah.
excuse me, sorry, Druckenmiller's bet is twofold, right? Like in the short term, he's on the 2-year yield, betting that it's not gonna go up. This is what the article that you're referring to is talking about, asymmetric,
Yep.
and that's what I'm talking about when it comes to stagflation and things like that. And then in the longer term, whenever they can't kick the can anymore, and this is what I've been pushing back on you against, Gerardo, and the talk about, you know, the bond vigilantes and the bond market breaking. It's like, I've been seeing this movie for 10 years, longer. I've been seeing this movie since 2008, and the movie hasn't ended yet. And even in that article, Druckenmiller says he doesn't know when it's gonna
Sure, nobody does.
He doesn't know if this bet is gonna pay off in 6 months or 6 years, and that's why I've been preaching to you: manage your own stuff, stay plugged in, be in tune with what the dollar, the rates, and policy are doing, and own the assets that are going up as a result. So bringing it all the way back to gold now. In the short term, or even the short to medium term, gold's already been hitting record highs. We went to $3,500 an ounce. This with the Fed increasing rates after the COVID crisis was over. Now back up above 4% on the federal funds rate. Well, as I was writing earlier this year, and as we've said on this podcast, what do you think is going to happen to precious metals who typically trade inversely to bond yields? If you go in and start artificially cutting those bond yields, it's going to fucking go up. The same way that if you continue to run up the debt and the deficit and pass a big, beautiful bill, the dollar's going to do what? It's going to go down. And it's the reason you have the DXY below 100 and Y gold
below
and
98.
Copper, platinum, palladium are running. And it even tried to get out of bed over the past couple of days, and it couldn't.
No. And the reason it couldn't, because these are structural problems, folks. So the same way that we have structural deficits in the copper space, that we have structural deficits in the uranium space, structural meaning you can't fix them with a signature. You can't fix them by just wishing it so or printing. With uranium, with copper, you still have to go find the supply to keep up with the demand, and there's just not enough. That means the prices go up to bring new supply on, but that's going to take years. Because you don't just permit a copper mine, make a copper discovery, permit a copper mine, get it out of the ground, refine it, and sell it into the market. It just doesn't work that way. It doesn't happen that quickly. And so expansions take time, discoveries take time. And look, I think Druckenmiller.
Do you know what the State Department says? Do you know how many years the State Department says it takes for a new mineral asset to come online? I was reading some stuff because of the rare earth things that are going on, which hopefully we'll also talk about.
Yeah.
And the official government documentation says 29 years.
Mm-hmm.
29 years.
That's what it's been. That's what it's been. Look, Perpetua Resources, formerly Midas Gold. You always say you started buying that company before your daughter was born.
That's right.
And how old is your daughter?
They went into permitting in 2016. I've owned it, I think, since 2012 or 2013, but she was born in 2016. That's when they entered permitting, and she was 9 when they got their permit. So 9 years just for permitting. Just for permitting.
And then that discovery took years and years and years of exploration, drilling, and tens of millions of dollars to make. And so, I think we can make the gold and silver and copper and uranium calls pretty quick. Like, I think they're all going higher. What do you think? Any pushback on that? PGMs, palladium, platinum?
No, that stuff's all bullish. I mean, gold bullish back above 3,300. It could go to 3,400, needs to go to, like, I don't know, 3,175 or really low 32s to even think about being bearish. Copper hit all-time highs while I was gone. We had the threat of a 50% tariff from Trump, which also doesn't make any sense because we don't have any smelters in the United States. So if you want to lower costs for Americans who are building things or business owners who need copper as an input, they're just going to be paying more for the copper because we don't make any of that stuff here. But anyway,
which means you pay more for the houses, which means you pay more for the grids, which means you pay more for the energy that's going into this thing, which counters the good part of your bill, the critical metals part, which we'll talk in a little bit. But again, none of this makes sense, folks. This is not partisan. This is just stupid.
Yeah. The copper's getting so expensive that some people at the conference were saying, I don't know the exact price, but at a certain price, it makes sense to switch to aluminum, even for the electrical wires, because you might lose some conductivity and therefore some electricity, but the cost savings pays for itself by switching to the other metals. So no, but PGMs, bullish, platinum bullish, What else? Uranium bullish, silver bullish. Yeah, and especially if we're going to do this replace Powell song and dance. So interesting to see what happens. But inflation definitely ticking up as well, which you mentioned. So and which I said was going to happen. So but sort of bottomed out in the April timeframe on a monthly basis is back up to nearly 7%. And yeah, things are getting interesting out there.
Yeah. Listen, gold, silver, copper, uranium, all headed higher. Bond yields look to me like they're headed higher. How much higher? How quickly? I don't know. I don't get to decide that stuff, but it looks like they're headed higher. Dollar looks like it's headed lower. All of that bad for the average Joe, bad for non-asset owners, like we've been telling you for years. Really good for those of us that are positioned in copper, gold, silver, uranium assets, right? Especially for companies that have catalysts that are drilling, that are looking to make those discoveries or already have them and are looking to develop them and monetize them. And on that note, I got to ask you, Nick, the Rick Rule Symposium, the conference. I know you and advisor and mentor to us, Jeff Phillips, were out there. Rick Rule was there, among many others. Van Simmons, who's another advisor and mentor to us, who's been so kind and generous with his time and input. All of you made it. I stayed behind. I figured there was enough representation there. But how was it?
We held it down. I want to be careful because I don't want to give away too many names,
Yeah.
but it's a quality conference, right? So for a company to be able to attend there and present, they've got to be in Rick Rule's portfolio, either his personal portfolio or one of the things he manages. So you have some sort of vetting there to know that Rick has likely participated in a private placement or otherwise bought shares of the company. Could also mean they've got some outstanding warrants with a 5-year time frame, but that's another discussion. The conference was great. It's at the Boca Raton Resort, which I had never been to. You mentioned proximal to Palm Beach, where Epstein hangs out, where Trump flies into to go to Mar-a-Lago. We were talking about a big club earlier. It's just interesting the amount of wealth that's there and in that area, right? I haven't spent a lot of time there. I've gone fishing in the Keys, but haven't spent a lot of time in north of Miami and Boca or Palm Beach or any of those enclaves. I mean, just $5 and $10 million houses after $5 and $10 million houses lining the canals that the dinner cruise goes on, which is part of the Rick Rule conference. And I'm making a point here is that there's different levels of wealth. There's different levels of everything you'll come to learn in life. It's part of Pareto's principle, like 80-20, like 20% of the 100 are always doing something more expensive or always buying something more expensive, right? And you can break that down all the way to the 0.0001%, right? Who are all on the Epstein list, by the way. But anyway, so a men's haircut at the Boca Raton is, you want to guess how much a men's haircut at the Boca Raton is? Somebody told me because they I guess needed a haircut. It's a gentleman you and I know. I won't say his name. But.
I mean, just clippers, or like we're talking to Buzz? Probably clippers for most of the guys there, right? I would imagine that there's
scissor cut, clippers and scissors. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go $95. Plus, you got to leave a generous tip.
Yeah, you would be off by 100%. It's $180 to get a men's haircut at the and that's what he was saying.
9 lap dances. No, I'll cut my own hair.
He was saying. He was like, I'm in my 60s. I'm half bald. He was like, I thought something was wrong. And they said, no, that's what it cost. He was like, I was here for 10 minutes. I was like, oh, my God. Anyway, so the conference was great. I knew you were going to ask, but I was struggling to tell you how to recap it because it's some of the stuff that we were just talking about, right? It's a lot of Danielle DiMartino Booth and Jim Rickards telling you that the Fed and the federal government have backed themselves into a corner. It's Grant Williams and Dr. Nomi Prins telling you that the next couple of years are going to be uncertain and you need to own gold and silver. You likely don't own enough. Grant Williams' talk was particularly interesting to me. He talked a little bit about generational theory and cycles and first principles of investing, saying that the next couple of years are going to be very uncertain, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be very risky for you if you know what to own. And that's something that you say all the time. And then, of course, you get to hear from Rick a ton. You get to hear from quote unquote influencers, of which I suppose I'm one. I was on the influencer panel along with Jay Martin, who runs the Cambridge House conferences, the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference,
which was great. It's always great. We've been there, several years, and always runs a tight ship and does a phenomenal job. If y'all can make it this year, next year, make it. It's well worth your time, folks.
Absolutely. And there's the Metals Investor Forum. That's adjacent to that. That's a good show to go to as well.
Yeah.
Paul Harris was on that panel. Danielle Cambone, who was with Kitco and then Stansberry and is now with a gold trading group. And then Adam Taggart, who is, I forget the name of his outfit, but I've come across his videos and they're great. I think he's the Silicon Valley Contrarian or the Silicon Valley something. He comes from a tech background. But anyway, he was good. So, and then you get to hear from other newsletter writers. Porter Stansberry was there talking about his permanent portfolio, which is a iteration on Harry Brown's portfolio, which my own foundational profits portfolio has some of that in there. It's sitting on a quarter gold and a quarter cash, give or take at any given time, stuff like that. Yep. And then you get to hear from some of the heavyweights in the industry. So Sean Ruzin was there. He found and developed Canada's largest open pit gold mine. Canadian Malartic is currently head of Osisko Development, which is bringing a new gold mine into production. Robert Friedland, who needs no introduction. You get to hear from all these people, and then you get to really dig in deep with the companies because they get a presentation on the main stage, and then they get sort of a breakout, and then they get a breakfast or a lunch. So again, got to spend some time with Bravo Mining. We're talking about PGMs, right? And their stock
there's your freebie,
went up,
folks.
went up while we were there. Whose chairman wasn't there, who owns 50% of the stock because he was in China on perhaps more important business. I.e. looking for bidders for the assets. So I don't want to ramble, but quality meetings, quality people. Let me talk about the people for a second. The conference is not free to attend. It's in Boca. It's not easy to get to from some places, especially for me, all the way in the far corner of the world here in Spokane. And so you really got to make a commitment, a time commitment, a capital commitment to go there and get it done. And therefore, there's very high net worth and high quality individuals. I met several individuals who subscribed to your publications and my publications. A couple of gentlemen, one I told you, a fund manager from Luxembourg, like a pretty big fund manager from what I gathered sitting with him for 3 or 4 minutes. Thanking you for Perpetua. And then folks that are in private placements with us were there, and just people from all over the world. I met another fund manager from Singapore, and I guess that's the last thing. So there's, when I go to this event, which I've never been to before, it seemed like there were two camps, right? It was like the high net worth US guy, right? And that's what I've known to be sort of our clients over the years. The retired dentist who owned a practice, the retired physician, the guy who owned a couple of plumbing vans, has a couple of $1 million and doesn't quite know the investment game, right? But knows there's more to it and knows that they can make more money. And that's really, I think, where we come in is doing a better job educating those folks about the private placement market. Because some of those folks simply had no idea or hadn't done a private placement, and they definitely should be doing them. And those folks who sort of are in that dollar doom club, right? They're in that dollars dying, gold's going to the moon, like those sort of folks. And then this year, I don't know if this is new or not because I've never been there, but I think it is because the sector is heating up. It's just smart money, right? Like people who aren't necessarily resource folks, but there was a couple of banks and trading houses represented there, JP Morgan. I met an Indonesian fund manager who was visiting from Singapore. So people are starting to do due diligence on the sector. They're wondering how to get exposure and allocate to this precious metals and critical resources thing. And I guess that's a pretty good summation. The last thing I would say is that, and we've already mentioned it, is like news continues to break, right? So like we're at the conference and NP Materials is getting a $400 million investment, an equity investment from the federal government. We're at the conference and Trump is talking about 50% tariffs. So these companies are chomping at the bit. And despite what the day-to-day does, dollar up, dollar down, bond yields up, bond yields down, the fact of the matter is, and this is an important takeaway even for me, is that we're in a long-term commodity / resources / critical minerals bull market. And you got to make hay when the sun shines. And so that's what's happening now. Deals getting done. I'm starting to ramble now, but you know, M&As
No.
being
You're making
announced,
all the
M&As
sense.
being announced. Anglo Gold Ashanti took out Augusta Gold, consolidating a land package in Nevada this week. Like now's the
Revival
time
Gold
to.
got a $29 million injection by people
There
that
you
want
go.
those assets. That wasn't happening 2 years ago.
Correct. That was announced during the conference, and I introduced Hugh that morning. The morning after that deal was announced, I introduced him for his breakfast. He had lots of questions. Dundee Capital or Dundee Corp was there, who already had a stake in Revival, and they're very smart money. I introduced them for their lunch and listened to the criteria that they use to vet deals and some of the shorthand tricks that they use in terms of grades and tonnage and KPIs or key metrics that they look for when investing in the deal. And they took the liberty this week to top off their position in Revival Gold. So not only does Revival check all those metrics that they have, being some of the smarter money in the resource space, but Dundee is content to write another check to maintain their position in Revival. And now, you know, speaking of things taking longer in the mining space, been in Revival since 2017. And now they've got two assets, one that can be permitted in 2 years, both past producers, still undervalued, still unloved on a whatever he would tell you, a P to NAV basis, price to NAV basis, trading at 0.15 when the peers are at 0.6, et cetera. Now they have this runway, right? Now they have 2-3 years of capital runway to go and drill and permit and make their property payments. They don't have to worry about this financing overhang, and you can see that the market likes the deal because it traded some, I don't know, 10 cents higher than the financing price, and then the total continues to walk up. So before I navigate into word salad, let me pull it back there and say that the sentiment was bullish. There was some quality deals there, and we did a private placement last week as well, which we talked about. Is now oversubscribed. The subscription documents are out, and that deal was being done at 3 cents, and shares went to 9 cents during the conference when that deal was announced, because Rick Rule is participating along with
It's a
Jeff Phillips, who's
200% gain and the deal's still open, folks. So again,
correct.
like, and this is a deal that Nick and I talked with you about, 2 weeks ago, about the due diligence that went into the deal and structuring the deal and restructuring the share structure and getting the Jeff Phillips and the Rick Rules of the world involved, and, really mapping out what the next year looks like, locking up those shares for 12 months. All of that due diligence, for those of you that are on the sidelines thinking about, if you're an accredited investor, thinking about signing up for the private placement service, and you're wondering what kind of due diligence and what kind of deals you get into, that's the kind of due diligence that's being done on your behalf before we bring a deal to you. And so, yeah, no, and look, I think the track record continues to speak for itself. I don't want to sound braggadocious, but the facts are the facts. The last two are up, if not 100%, over 100%, and they're not even a month out. One hasn't even closed, and I could go on. Last year we were 10 for 11, and number 11's about to work out because they just restructured, and I think that deal is going to go a lot higher and might end up doing better than a lot of the other deals that have worked out well for us already. So a lot to like. I want to use your comment there about the breaking news while you were at the conference, because we had breaking news the minute you got back, and that was Apple deciding to take a direct stake in MP Materials, the same company that got the commitment from not just the Department of Defense, but JP Morgan and BlackRock to fund rare earth and rare earth separations. And for Apple, they're focusing on the recycling aspect of it, and they're focusing, rightfully so, on expanding
On
the
the
heavy rare earth
heavies.
expansion. And the heavies are important because Mountain Pass is light on those. And Apple's way of bypassing the fact that Mountain Pass doesn't have many or any of the heavies, which are the critical ones for the Apples and the Defense Department, is they want to contribute. I believe it was $400 million by taking a direct stake and helping with an five.
Apple was 5, half a billion. Yeah.
Apple was like, well, there you go. They've hundreds of millions getting tossed around like it's nothing, right? But they want to focus on recycling the heavies. And again, this is Apple. This isn't Nick and Gerardo writing a check into MP Materials and hoping that somebody does this. This is Apple saying, we'll give you $500 million if you can
Correct.
be our arm to recycle these heavies for us, because we don't have the time or the expertise, but you do. And we have all the money in the world. So you guys want to be friends? It's a match made in heaven. And again, a lot of this is happening, credit where credit is due, because of the expansion and acceleration of what was in the Inflation Reduction Act and Trump adopting it as his own. but fast tracking it and expediting it. And kudos on that front. I'm critical when I believe it's merited. And I'm also, uh, complimentary and obviously I'm grateful that on that side of things, he seems to have good advisors because all of that on the uranium and the critical metal side is making sense. The copper stuff, I don't know who's talking to him about tariffs, but none of that makes sense. Thoughts on the Apple deal?
Yeah. So listen, we were just talking about private placements. So we financed a company last May. It's just been over a year. That does what Apple wants. They
Yep.
recycle rare earths from existing hard drives. They take hard drives and they extract the magnets in them, and then they recycle the magnets. Um, which is exactly what this country needs. It's what that deal that Apple signed was for. So we financed that company at 50 cents. It has hit all-time highs in the past couple of weeks, around 95 cents. So nearly a double inside a year. And we have warrants to buy more, I believe. So at any rate, that's good work if you can get it. A couple of months ago, I put out a new video about this very thing when the trade war first started to break out. And I was saying, look, this is a repeat of what we saw in 2011, which you, Gerardo, know very well. Um, and I recommended a couple of companies that are set to produce or are already producing rare earths here in the United States. They are not MP materials. I know you mentioned it last week with Jody, but the federal government's taking a $400 million equity stake, right? They're buying preferred shares. We're now shareholders of MP Materials by nature of us being U.S. taxpayers and citizens. They also gave them a $150 million loan with preferred terms. And the federal government said that they would be a backstop on rare earth prices. So if China was ever to flood the market and prices dumped, MP would still be able to operate
Yep.
profitably because, as we know, the resource market is cyclical and you're beholden to the cost of the commodity. If the cost of the commodity is above that floor price that they set, I forget what it is,
110.
100 a kilogram. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Correct.
I was going to say 100. So if it's above that, then the federal government makes money. So you can argue that that's not very capitalistic. And I might actually listen to and entertain that argument with the federal government holding stock on its balance sheet. But now you have Apple coming in. And I want to talk about uranium quickly because just as there's not a lot of rare earth companies, so I'll get to uranium in a second, I guess. I've recommended two. And so this Apple deal is about MP's plant in Texas, which is called the 10X plant. You got to love that name if you're a newsletter writer or your name is Grant Cardone.
Stuff sells itself, man.
Exactly. So the factory is called the 10X factory, and that's where they're going to be recycling these rare earths. You know, the company that I'm involved with and have helped finance is also in Texas, outside of Fort Worth, and will also be producing rare earths by 2027. So, and the other one has a mill in the southwestern U.S. that is already producing rare earths and has a plan to increase the heavies that they announced in the past 2 months by importing monazite clays from Africa and Australia. So there's different ways to profit from this. Clearly, the MP story is resonating. Those shares went up 50% on the back of that federal government
Yep.
announcement, and I think another 10 to 20%
Yep.
on the back of this Apple announcement. So we'll continue to invest in rare earths. I'll encourage you to check out that video. And then the last thing I want to say on that is, because this is where my brain went during the conference, is, well, who's the next one? If Apple is a plus
Yeah.
$2 trillion company and they can put 0.05, 0.0025 of their market cap to just secure their rare earths, who's next?
You already cover it, so I'm not going to say it. We're going to save it for the premium portion of the podcast, which we'll pivot to in a second. But you already cover it. It's the only reason I haven't recommended it, because we've tried to avoid that over the last several years. Nick and I think a lot alike when it comes to the markets and picks and just kind of macro and micro on a lot of stuff. And though Nick does other sectors outside of the resource space, on this one, him and I had been waiting to recommend, and you recommended it several months back, and you were spot on with that recommendation. And it happens to provide coverage to both uranium and rare earths. So yeah, I think that's the next one.
So who's next, right? When does Meta sign their rare earth deal? When does
Yeah.
whoever, right? When does
Yeah.
the GM, I think, is going to buy some of those magnets? And so then my brain went to uranium, and I'll wrap it up so we can get to the premium portion. Is, well, when does, we've already had these announcements for uranium for modular reactors, all the big boys, Meta, Oracle, etc., the Amazon, Microsoft. When do they just sign an offtake agreement for uranium or fund a uranium development company? Just like Tether recently took a pretty decent sized stake in a gold royalty company to get some gold exposure to back their stable coins. If you're a tech
Real gold
company,
exposure.
real gold exposure. Yeah, they didn't buy a gold backed crypto, did they, Gerardo? They didn't buy
Fuckers.
Nat Gold. Anyway, so when do they announce a uranium deal is where my brain went, right? Because if you're going to build however many modular reactors, and Kathy Hochul's going to build a new light water reactor in New York, it seems like these tech companies, for just a small portion of the market cap, could secure the offtake, and that would really lead to the juniors getting a bit.
Well, no, listen, and then my ADHD brain, that immediately goes to everything else, except the problem with my ADHD brain is it's sometimes right. It's like bias confirmation. So I had been thinking it would make so much sense for Volkswagen or Honda or GM or any one of those companies to go to Patriot Battery Metals and say, oh, Mo, you have cesium, you have tantalum, you have gallium, and you have lithium. We need all of those. How about we built this plant and we guarantee that we're going to buy all the supply from you, but you guarantee us the supply and we'll put a floor underneath it, exactly like what happened. And again, I sat here and thought about this like a month ago, but then I get Jody out here and he agrees with me. And Jody, trust me, folks, is much more tied in and much more intelligent and well, more disciplined in his thoughts than I am when it comes to those critical metals. But he's like, absolutely, I think that's the future. And now I'm sitting here going, man, I'm still glad we own a whole heck of a bunch as a group, our Patriot Battery Metal shares and several other names, which I think it's
Correct.
a perfect segue to the premium portion of the podcast, unless you have anything else you want to get off your chest.
No, do it. No, thanks for watching. Let's talk about some premium picks, and we can make it quick because we already mentioned a couple.
I am Gerardo Del Real along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was the 326th episode of Investing in Bizarro World. I'm going to say it one more time in case I don't get to say it again. Jerome, you guys have a great week out there, folks.
See ya.